All right. So when we see the transcription to the right, that kind of lets us know that we're officially recording. And so here we are. Welcome back, everyone, to Conversations from the Underground. My name is Eric Salas. We have with us Dr. Bujarity. And, the way we're going to run these meetings as we're trying to make it consistent with, using the first 5 minutes to just kind of touch base and break bread and catch up to see what's up. So what's going on, man? What's got going on this week?
Oh man, busy. Just woke up from a little nap, man. Was at my parents' house eating. October is difficult for us because it's my brother's birthday today. It was mine a couple of days ago, and it was my sister's like a few days before that. So we all kind of just get together, eating too much food. Finally got out of there. I get home, I passed out for like 2 hours, missed the whole basketball game.
Oh yeah. Oh, the Mavs did all right. If that was the game,
I was looking for the Pels really, because I'm really interested in what they got going on right now.
Who was Zion?
Yeah, it was Zion, Brandon Ingram.
Oh yeah.
A big three is going to be, I think, pretty nice if they can stay healthy.
Yeah, I like Ingram. He's been very impressive since they left Lakers and stuff. So.
Yeah. What about you? What's going on with you?
Oh man, the same old, same old. I finally finished all my grades. I'm glad that's out of the way. But man, everyone else is right around, their midterms, and here I am over barely finishing up my first round of grading. But I can't really pace myself at other people's paces. Whereas, I think cats work with like midterms and quarters. I work in like trimesters within a semester, if that makes any sense. Because we only have 4 grades, really only 3 of them because one of them's a primary source. So it's like the first exam, the midterm, and then a final. So it's more of like a trimester as opposed to a half-mester, at a midterm point, if you will. But just trying to keep up with that.
Every semester with how far you get, where you go in your classes. Is that a big issue? Is that something that's always on your mind?
Yeah, man, I'm always racing. I need more time because the things that take place in everyday life tend to find their way into our lectures. So, not for nothing, I was supposed to lecture over the Bill of Rights. This was supposed to be that's a slam dunk conversation. Let's talk about the First Amendment. We're in Texas, so obviously we got to hit the Second Amendment. And there's some other amendments that I personally want to touch base on. But the moment we hit that First Amendment, here comes my head. The floodgates open up, and I have to take into consideration, how I'm viewing the world and what I'm perceiving from the news. And then, that leads to not a can of worms, but, anything's possible when you're talking about the First Amendment. And so what's supposed to be a 5-minute, 10-minute, breakdown turns into 55 minutes. I'm not even lying. Not even lying. The students are waiting for me to be like, can we go to the next slide? And I can't get off of it.
It's funny how that works. It's like that with me as well. I think I'll do a lot of, I don't know, and it could be different with each course, each day. I think depending on how I approach the start of class, I'll end up getting on some kind of 20, 25-minute row on some kind of topic where I didn't quite anticipate coming in. So I feel like I got to speed up somewhere else to kind of catch up. It's weird like that, but I kind of like that about our job too, right? Because things don't ever get boring. They don't ever get dull. Life is always moving, and we're always responding to it at the workplace. So I kind of like that. I have a hard time maybe doing the same thing over and over again every day. So I can
not me, man. My thing is like it seems like it's the same thing over and over, but it's not because my audience is different. And so the audience, based on their feedback, that they give me the energy to come back with different energy. And whatever I say in one classroom, even if I try to replicate it in another classroom organically, it's never the same. I know it's forced. because I felt like it was really positive in this classroom. Let me try to replicate it in this classroom, but it can't be replicated because those students brought that conversation up. Those students interjected with their positions or their points. And it really is like organically unique. And then again, it runs for 45 minutes. And then when I run into my next class, I'll try to calm myself down and say, all right, Eric, no, don't do this. Just go 20 minutes. And so sometimes it works, sometimes it don't.
Yeah, I like that idea. I mean, the conversation went pretty quick. That 5 minutes goes fast, and we didn't
The
talk
5 minutes is gone.
Yeah, we didn't
It's
talk
gone
about.
now.
But you know what really hits me, I think, maybe is this issue of time. Uh, how we make time, how we establish our courses, and how much our job is connected to time is interesting. So like, we're in that classroom with these students for a set of time, and we have to get out and go do something else for some time. And our whole subject is about time. We have to compartmentalize time. We have to break it up into different categories of our job when it comes to writing history. History is all about sort of like investigating the time that came before us. So I wonder to what extent it would be worth exploring this theme here for the next hour. But if you got something different, I'm all ears.
No, we can definitely explore the theme of time. I know for a fact that is something that in our field of work, there's a tendency to think of things in a linear sense.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if linear is, I mean, I'm not sure if that's an like a segment of time. Obviously, we more often than not we tend to operate in a chronological fashion,
Mm.
thinking that things have to build upon each other and move forward in that direction. But I've seen you, I know for a fact that we don't have to teach in a chronological fashion, that
Right.
history doesn't have to be relegated by time, that if we focus on themes, we can still hit many important subjects. Because I know you do teach that.
Yeah, I
Aren't you
do.
doing that commodities
Yeah, that
in a
commodity
theme?
for World Civ 2 is really interesting because time is sort of like a subsidiary of the of our focus. It's going all over the place. We take a particular commodity, we tell history, the history of the world through the lens of commodities. So we'll have something like chocolate or tea or cannabis or opium or cotton or sugar. And we start out with a definition of this, go into some detail about it, and then we start pulling aspects of history which this commodity was prevalent in, as we explore the past. And in another course, a World Civ 1 class is a little bit different. I don't do it as a commodity yet, but it's more like a theme. So the first theme is about history. What is history? And then humanity. What is humanity? Uh, and culture. What is culture? And so we'll talk about like the creation of buildings and cities and civilizations and language and clothes and art, that early phase of Mesopotamia and all that stuff through the topic of culture, whereas we explore like the Stone Age and Australopithecus and Neanderthal through the concept of history, right? And then we'll have something like society. What is a society? How societies organize themselves differently, or nations. What is a nation? And we have nations of people. Conquest. What is that? Empire. What is that? Right? And I like doing that because it gives me this ability to start out with some practical. The first 45 minutes of class or of each topic, hour of each topic, is usually us defining this idea and what it is. But I haven't tried that yet with my history 1301 or 1302 courses. I've sort of changed it up a bit, but it's still sort of a chronological thing. The only time I've done it non-chronologically would be history 1302, from Reconstruction to the present, where I had to teach two of them classes back to back, and I didn't want to repeat myself. So the second one I started at the end and went backward. And
Man.
I didn't prepare much for that. Maybe about a week before class, I threw the syllabus together and did it. And I can tell you there were some brilliant pieces to that class, but then there were also some backlashes or some confusion wait a minute, how does this fit in, and why are we going back here to do that? And but maybe that could been a lot for, because it's the first time I've ever did that class. I don't know.
Nah, for sure, definitely, for sure. And considering we're teaching intro courses, survey courses on U.S. history, and you know, I know you teach World Civ, so that's more of an advanced, I guess, what do they call it, upper level history course. But you know, most of our students, I know you got the chops to handle themes. However, when someone's learning, they may want to take it in a very linear fashion because it will make much more sense in that capacity. And what I mean by that is, like, you know how, you know, back in the day, you know, you and I are old enough to know when we would play video games, yo, you went from one end of the screen to the other end of the screen, and that was it. Like, it was like, you know, you remember games like, you know, Super Mario. You know, you go from here to here. That's what it is.
Right.
We're playing Double Dragon. You're going from here to here. Contra, hit what? No, because sometimes Contra went vertical. But my point is that you're always starting from this end and you're going to that end.
Right.
Games tend to get more complicated when you're no longer in this 2D environment. When you enter 3D environments, maybe I don't even know what 4D is, but I know 3D. And the analogy would be, I remember my first time playing this game called I think it was Super Mario World, where this full Mario was jumping into things and coming over here, and it required a great deal of exploring. And I think before you can start playing a game like that, you have to have some foundation in the linear game. I think. And so I think there's more room for confusion amongst our students at this level, right? We're talking about students that are like, yo, you know, Mr. Salas, relax. I'm required to take this course, man. Like, I'm an engineering major or I'm a biology major. And I'm just trying to get, you know, the basic understanding of this. I'm not sure if I'm ready for 3D chess.
Right.
You feel me? As opposed to, yeah. So,
man, we get that a lot, man. These kids being there, I feel like I have to address that oftentimes, man, because they come into us like, well, come on, this is just history. Like, you over here trying to make me, you teach acting like I'm in graduate school here with all the stuff that you're making me think about and do. Sometimes it's a little too much for them, I think, but maybe not. I mean, it's going to make you better
not for me.
Too, right? Because there's a history of everything. And if you want to be successful in whatever it is you're doing, man, go to the history. If you want to be a great engineer, go see what engineers before you have done and why and how and when and all these other types of things, right? And so, you know, there is this connection of linear connection with time and progress that we're used to, right? It's like time moves forward, and in the process, you're supposed to be progressing to something. And I wonder, you know, to what extent it's important to let these students know that you are, by putting the time into this course, even though this is the last thing you thought you'd ever care about, you're building towards something that you may not even really know that you're building towards in the moment. You're strengthening your mind. You're looking at things in different angles. And real talk, man, out of everything I've done in my life, I feel like the most progress, the most growth has come when I've been forced to look at a topic or something from a different angle than I was used to. When I'm able to draw a connection from one thing to another that I was unaware of. When I was able to sort of like see how something is connected from point A to point B without really noticing that connection beforehand. And so regardless of what these students are doing, and not only that, but you couple that with this idea that, you know, more struggle brings more progress, period, right? So if you're struggling in this class, then you're improving in other dimensions of your life.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely agree with that. However, I can also see how um, more struggles in the moment can seem like no progress.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, if I keep finding hurdles in front of me, then it may be difficult for me to break through. And then, much like the gig itself, we don't see the rewards or the fruits of this like conversation or exchange like in the moment. You always see it after the fact. You see it later, where you get that aha, oh, this does connect to that. So
Yeah.
like in the midst of the struggle that you're talking about, right, where things are complicated and difficult, I think what scares people or what maybe unnerve people or bother people or discourage people is that in the midst of the fight or understanding something, they don't. And then because they don't have that immediate um, confirmation of getting it, they feel like they don't or they won't, and that it serves no purpose or has no value until that moment where it does become like a aha, oh, I can connect this to that. Unless you're talking about, and what I was getting at was like a student coming to like a self-realization of the information. Whereas I think what you're saying, and I do agree with you, is that you show them.
Yeah.
You show them those connections where there may not need a self-realization, but you as the professor are guiding them to those connections.
Yeah. And sometimes it takes several times to guide. You know, you can, as they say, you can bring the horse to the water, and you can try to get that horse to drink that water as much as you want, but that horse got to open his mouth and swallow, no matter how much you shove his mouth in that water. And so, in a way, yeah, guiding them is key. We're doing that, and one of the things that I think makes both of us successful instructors is that we have a capacity, I think, to relate to many people who may not otherwise be able to see those connections, because we can rephrase it and repackage it in certain ways that makes it make sense. But on the other
Mm.
hand, one thing that you said that really, I'm fortunate enough, I feel, was my background, having a bachelor's degree in philosophy, was early on when I was struggling to make connections myself because I was still barely off, you know, off the transition from my old way of living to this new way of living, and I was struggling to read books and all these other types of stuff. I had this professor, Dr. Denny Bradshaw, for like philosophy of the mind, philosophy of language, all these really dope ass classes, and he basically we'd read these very complicated 2 or 3 page, sometimes 10 page articles that have these thick, dense uh, phrases and paragraphs, and he would often say, relax, read it, uh step away, read again. You may not always get it on the first time. Let it marinate, let it sink
Mm.
in. Go do something else and then come back and read it again. He'd always say you have to read a philosophy article 3 times. I'd be like, what? I could barely get through this thing one time. You over here trying to tell me I need to read it 3 times? And it took me a while to kind of take his advice, but it really helped, I think, because sometimes we need, it's like that brain works with time uh, to strengthen the information that you've put in it. And in our society, I think a lot of times students are so quick to want to get the information and then move on to something else. And they feel like, well, just going through it all is okay and I'm done. But that's maybe just the start of it, yo. Maybe going through it is the start. And you really got to sink in and think of it different ways and rewrite your notes and spend time reading your notes and thinking about them more.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's funny when you brought up like when you were going through, you know, your transition to academia and
Yeah.
realizing the amount of time you needed to put in and more. But here's what was really interesting because you just said exactly what I was thinking around this notion of, you know, your professor dropping knowledge on you for a second, and in that time you weren't ready to receive it.
Right.
So like what's interesting, and I have a good friend of mine that told me all the time, is like, man, you know what's crazy is that time is this thing that you just can't control. That's that variable. It's a variable in almost every facet of life. And it has timing is everything. Timing is everything. And what's wild about it is that sometimes you can't control it, but it's everything.
Right.
But it's out of your control too at times. And what I mean by also this notion of because there's sometimes when I'm dropping dimes in lecture. I'm dropping dimes in lecture, but that doesn't mean they're ready to receive it.
Right.
It's not their time.
Yeah.
And in that moment, it goes with advice. There have been times where I've heard advice, but it wasn't my time to receive it. And it'd be like 5 years later, it'd be 10 years later, it might be 2 weeks later where it then hits me, and then I'm ready.
Right.
And I feel like for many of our students, man, I don't want to.
I feel like
I feel like at times they don't have time.
Yeah, they feel like they don't have time.
Yeah.
Right? They feel like they don't have time. Dang, my phone looks like it's gonna die on me. I think we're good though for a minute. Did I lose you? Or are we good?
No, I'm sure. I'm right here.
Yeah, no, I feel like they it's like a race against time. A lot of times people feel like that. And this kind of goes back to like our history here. Like, what is time? I have a brief little 40-minute lecture that I give in the Second Industrial Revolution in History 1302 when we're talking about the second half of the 19th century. I call it a cultural history of time. And we talk a little bit about how time is socially constructed in many ways. You think of a New York minute is a much different type of minute than a minute in Texas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if you think about the master apprentice relationship, when people prior to that mass consuming, mass production, distribution society, you didn't go clock in and punch in a time clock. You didn't even have a watch. You didn't even have to look at a time that's ticking all day long. If you were lucky, you had a sundial, which doesn't really work at night, right? So you lose time oftentimes. Some people would have these little candles that have notches in them, and as the notch went down, damn, I better get some sleep here before time runs out on me. But you get a gust of wind to blow out your candle, and then you lose time. But you're not so interested or focused on time prior to the rise of the boss-employee relationship, time zones, the movement of people, and then time starts to equal money, right? Time starts to speed up.
Or at least that's what they tell us.
Yeah, that's what they tell us, right? And then we got these photographs and pictures where we try to snap time, and then we during the middle of this transition, we would oftentimes focus on these images to hark back on them. Now, the average cat with his phone gonna take pictures. I'm like, when's the last time you went back and looked at that picture? I'd be messing with my wife. So you got like 8,000 pictures on there. Are you ever going to real? So now we're like capturing time so much that we don't even have the time to go back and reflect on them. It's interesting when you look at
everything you're saying. Like I said, everything you're saying is exactly what I think our students are going through. But like the way you're hitting it, the angle you're hitting at it is like you're right. So you're saying like with, I guess, the rise of the the employer-employee relationship, that our society, American society, begins to place this greater emphasis on time.
Definitely, yeah. So I kind of see prior to that something we call a task-oriented society, right? We live in a time-oriented society right now, but we used to be in a task-oriented society. You wake up in the morning, you got things to do, and you just check off the box until you do it, until you're either tired or it's dark or something like that. And you wake up in the morning and you start on the next list. But now, from that point to where we're at now, a significant transformation has taken place. And you look at what we're at today, and it's like you got to get up at a particular time. You got to eat in enough time to go and run to the next spot be here and to be staying with me for a time. Then you got to go clock in, and now your time belongs to your employer, and you do what they tell you to do for X amount of time before you move on out to your next thing. And if you're lucky, you may get a break or two of 2 weeks in the middle of your 50 some odd week year to kind of go refresh and leave. And then they create resort towns so that you can go to these places and refresh for amount of time before you come back and get on the grind again. And there are some industries that aren't like this still. I think our industry we're still succumb to time because no one can escape it in their society, but our job is a little bit different. We have a little bit more control over our time. We're supposed to be able to reflect more, prepare more, but we still got to be at places at particular time because we still belong to a time-oriented society. But yeah, I think this transformation is huge. Even something as basic as like time zones, right? I mean, we got 4 basic time zones where we're at today, but before we got there in the late 19th century, there was a time period, there was over 300 time zones in the United States at one time. They didn't know what to do. They're sitting there trying their hardest to figure out the process of transitioning from this old way to this new way. And what you said about our students kind of makes me think they're in this process right now as well. A different kind, maybe we're seeing time speed up a lot more now that we're in this. Richard de Grand Prix has this interesting book where he refers to this rapid fire culture that we live in. And I feel like there's something there with what we're dealing with, and how much technology has speeded up time again to the point where we may be in another era of transition from a task oriented to time oriented to now like a time oriented to a warp speed type of thing. We're moving much quicker, and it's difficult for anyone to process the transformation of time, which is something that's so central to one's being. When it's speeding up or slowing down in your society, it can be very difficult to make that transition.
No, for sure, man. I mean, I forgot where I saw it or what I was hearing, but it was along the lines of, many of these younger generations, and to a degree, we're included as well. This notion of multitasking, in an effort to save time.
Right.
And then we find out by multitasking, we are not efficient or proficient in either task, even though we want to believe that we are.
Right.
I guess I've heard that there are studies that would make arguments that no, you're not. You perform poor in both tasks simultaneously.
Right.
This thing that you think you're great at, and again, in an effort to do what? To have downtime, and then downtime to do what? I think technology has consumed up a great deal of time, which is why in most smartphones today, they'll inform you how much time you're spending on the screen.
Yeah.
How much screen time is affecting relationships, how much screen time is affecting one's ability to communicate and the lack thereof. How much screen time is, making people pasty pale, playing video. And that brought me to this conversation I was having with the students about how long they spend in video game or playing a video game. And I was like, hey man, why do you guys use those race car chairs? And they're like, for neck support, because they're in the chair for 8+ hours.
Right.
It's like, what are you doing for 8 hours? But hey, that's your time. And
a lot of time.
It is a lot of time.
You lose something maybe in that setting, but of course it could just be, it's hard to say. Is that our cultural lens influencing our perception? My son likes to try to tell me that this stuff helps him, and he'll start telling me all this research about how it makes you more innovative and smart, and what does he call it? Rapid sensory response, or I don't know, whatever. I mean, my brother be over here, and he can shoot somebody behind a screen from so far away and get all these kills, and he's gonna put all this work into being able to press a button on a screen.
And there's, I think, and on top of like what your boy's getting at is like, he looks at time or his investment in time. He sees the value in that.
Right.
Whereas we may not see that because we place value in time in other areas.
Right.
and he is seeing the value of his time in this area. And the value of time has this psychological effect that could be positive. And I think for at least the way he sees it, it's positive.
Right.
I've also seen the negative. And what I mean by that is, with many of our students graduating, many of them qualified. They got the degree. They got the resume. They have the CV. They're ready to go. So they go and look for a job, but there are no openings.
Mm.
And then what that does, the fact that they can't get a job, it does something to them, like psychologically, that they're not good enough. But it's not an issue of being good enough. It was an issue of time. People aren't hiring. I make a joke in class about that too. It was like, man, I was in a bar and I saw this young lady, and we were, talking back and forth. It was casual, nothing too serious, but I knew right then and there I fell in love. And then she turned over and I saw her hand and I saw the wedding ring. And then I knew, it's not my time,
Right.
And so I just wait, I befriend her on Facebook or something, and I just wait until that relationship ends so I can hurry up and have my time. But my point is like, just because something doesn't align with our timeline, if you will, is not a reflection of like who we are, but we take it as such.
You do. I wonder why.
Because I think like you said, we've been conditioned to look at time as something as of an enormous value or immense value, because we equate it with money too.
Yeah.
And that because we don't have time, it makes us feel like we're less than, or we're lacking, because things didn't work on our timeline or our time schedule. That maybe I've done something wrong. I've seen people do this, especially as they're trying to enter the job market right now,
right,
where they feel like they're qualified, but it's just, man, they're struggling to get a gig.
Yeah, that's interesting too, and it kind of reminds me too of this whole like love of first sight, and then it's like, oh, it's the wrong timing, and now I've lost my chance. Time and chance, time and opportunity, time and success, and how timing is everything. Yeah, it's interesting. We also put preparation. Someone once said that time or success equals time and preparation, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to lose sight of one and blame the other, and then get bad and feel bad. But if we adhere to this adage that it's preparation also, then
Yeah, but that goes back to that thing I was telling you about. When we're in the classroom, the students in that moment, they don't see it.
yeah, they don't. It's
Because
true.
there's not this immediate thing telling them, yo, this is the connection that we're making. And then later on, they have that aha moment. And when it comes to these individuals saying, where success is really preparation at the right time, or not preparation at the right time, but me constantly preparing, put me in a position to be successful when the time presented itself, when the time availed itself.
Yeah, they both got to work out at the right. You can't take advantage of that time if you're not prepared, right?
Right. Exactly.
But if you're
The notion of
prepared, that don't
preparing,
mean you're going to be successful, because the time may not.
that's
Right.
what that's,
Right.
I've been telling my students, like, you can, as hard as you may be working at something, you may not get it right then and there. And then you'll think of yourself as a failure, as opposed to considering the circumstances, the variables of the circumstance, as to why it's just not your time.
That's why I love that when Nipsey Hussle said, "I'll say it's worth it, I won't say it's fair. Find your purpose or you're wasting air." I feel like what he's saying there is it may not be fair that the time didn't work out for you. It may not be fair that something didn't work out. It may not be fair that I have to deal with this stuff more than you or whatever, but it's worth it. It's worth it for you to go through prepared, working hard to find your purpose, or else you're just wasting your time here. Like life ain't gonna be what it can be if you allow that unfairness to consume you, and you don't find that purpose or passion or drive, whatever you want to call it. That's why I always tell students, like, this is my purpose here. I don't feel like my job is a job. I mean, there are some aspects to it where people try to make it more difficult for me to do, but I'm still on it. I tell them students all the time, it's like, yo, I used to pay to go to school. Now I feel like I'm being paid to go to school. That's a double win for me, because I love what I do. And no matter how many wrenches these fools throw in my way, oh, you take away my office. All right, I'm gonna have to just keep running. I'm gonna keep dodging. Oh, you're gonna take away this. Oh, you're gonna take away that. All right, let me just keep adapting and keep moving. Which is why, although I respect it 100%, I see where people are going, and I'm all for it as well for them. But this idea of quiet quitting kind of thing, mad respect for you to do it, but I can't do it. It's not in my nature to do it, because what I'm doing is not really work. I can't quit my purpose. My purpose is my purpose, is what I do. I can't imagine myself doing anything outside of teaching in a college classroom.
For sure, man. I mean, like, we're very fortunate that we're able to, you and I, and this is, gives credence to, us wanting to be where we are because of the people we do work with, and how much we do see eye to eye on a multitude of things. I mean, like, we're mad fortunate and able to go into a classroom and enjoy what we do for a living.
Right.
The reality, though, is that most cats don't. They go to work.
Right.
And they don't go to work because not everybody goes to work at a job they don't like to buy things they don't need. It's not all wealth accumulation, man. Sometimes it's survival.
Right.
I look at my dad and I think about, the hours he put in. I know that man didn't like his job. He made it very clear, I don't like this job. But he knew that was essential or necessary in order to make it to the next month,
right,
to make it to this week, and so a lot of cats, they go to work begrudgingly. There is no, and for my dad, the job no longer becomes the purpose. For you and I don't think our job is the purpose. I think our purpose might be the ability to have free range of thought. I mean, where else could we do that except in the classroom? And even at times that seems a bit restricted, because of, variables. But I think you're right, man. We're very fortunate, because on top of this whole notion of teaching, because I used to teach 11th grade. If it was about teaching, I could go teach the 11th grade, but at that level and under that jurisdiction, you're on a time. You're on this schedule, you're on that schedule, you have to follow those rules, you have to follow these rules. We're very fortunate that we get to kind of set our own time.
Right.
If you really want to go 2 weeks in the civil rights movement, you could.
Right. Yeah, that's such a great point, man. And it's like the time is being less restricted versus more. And I feel like maybe there are these, when you start beholding the like taxpayers, or you're worried, like maybe some of the administration are, they start to make you kind of capitulate or fall into this thing of restricting your employees more, and maybe causing more problems. And it's interesting because with your father's example, straight up, I feel like that's a way, and you mentioned that it's a way that's somebody finding a purpose through going to work at a job he doesn't like, which is to maybe raise his children to be able to be fortunate enough to grow up and have that feeling, right? And so you can certainly find a powerful purpose. Just because you get stuck in a job that you don't like doesn't mean you can't find purpose. Doesn't mean you
For sure.
can't
And
do wrong, right? And I think your point on that with your pops is very key, a very great
that
example.
was my point for us, is that
Yeah.
our purpose isn't TCC.
Right. Right.
Our purpose is our passion, our love is that we get to still be students to a degree. Like we get to go into a classroom and it's our chemistry lab. Like we're going to the lab and we're running experiments with analogies. We're running experiments with thought. We're running experiments with new variables, which are the students. And we're cooking up something new every day. Every day. And so that's the passion or the purpose for me. I'd imagine the same is for you.
Yeah,
And I
for
know
sure.
for my dad that the purpose was never the gig he was working at. Like you said, like we all can find a purpose. And again, it's about where we want to place our value.
Right.
And we value the time, the conversation. We value the interaction. I like the downtime I get to not be at work and go spend it with my kids.
Yeah, for sure. Because you can do a lot there too. And TCC is like the vessel. And really what we have is different vessels in society. And sometimes those vessels become more constricted. You eat too much, your vessel, your vessel is going to be corroded with plaque, so the blood can't flow right. And maybe maybe we got these issues coming on here in some aspects of our institution where the vessels are being constricted, and it's unfortunate. Hopefully they'll get some statin meds and clean it up a little bit, let it start flowing more.
I was gonna like, yo, TCC needs an enema.
But it's like, if my advice, if you're quiet quitting because you don't like your job, that's great, but make sure in that quiet time you're still grinding. And I think that's what Nipsey meant when he said, I say it's worth it, I won't say it's fair, because all of us are going to have to go through harder channels to get where we want to get. My dad's got the best job of his life right now. Took him 73 years to get it. But if he would have quit, he'd still be selling rugs or running an ice cream truck or driving a taxi or hanging out at the car lot trying to sell used cars to somebody. Anything, grinding as much as he can. Now he's got this job, and he had to go through that time. And I tell that to my students a lot. It's another reason why I like being at TCC, is because I get a lot of students who come into my classroom at 40, 50, 60 even, ready to start over. For some reason or another, they felt or found something about their life that they want to shake up. And that, I think, you should try your hardest not to lose sight of that goal. If you're quiet quitting because you feel like your institution isn't giving you what they're constricting you, they're not giving you what you deserve, go ahead, but don't stop looking for what you do deserve. And
yeah, I was talking to somebody about that quiet quitting thing, and I know people that are doing it.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And I was thinking, well, why are you doing it? And they go, well, Eric, because we still got bills to pay. We still got to do this. We still got to, and I go, man, I get that, dog. I get that. And for me, at times I'm in a very fortunate position where, I can say something like, man, if I don't like that, I'm leaving. I'm not quietly quitting. I'm quitting loudly. You're gonna hear about me. I'm gonna be on the news. Something like that. Like,
right.
I'm not gonna suffer silently. What that sounds like?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna suffer silently. But I understand why some might, because at the end of the day, that job ain't their life.
Right.
They're trying to make it to the end of the week. They're trying to make it to the end of the month. And for you and me, this job isn't our life either. It's the occupation, if you will, the ultimately like what we get to do. That's our passion. And so I don't want to quit it, of course, but I understand why some might. I understand.
Yeah, I understand why somebody may be like, well, I'm not going to go the extra mile then if you're going to take away this or you're going to take away that. And maybe there is an element of quiet quitting on me, because once they take away my office, my whole life is going to shift and change. I'm not going to do certain things the way I used to, but I wouldn't consider that quiet quitting, because I'll channel it into other ways. And I think that's sort of what we got to worry about in our life is how do we channel, how do we adapt, how do we mold, so that we can continue to love what we do, uh, and do what we love. Because if you're not, you're just wasting air.
Hey, you know
Uh,
what you're really wasting? A lot of time.
a lot of
You're
time,
wasting a lot of time.
a lot of
Talk
time.
about air. You're wasting a
Yeah,
lot of time.
for real.
I mean,
Absolutely.
it'd be like renting an apartment. You putting a lot of money every
Right.
month into this lease, and when it's all said and done at the end of the year, what do you got to show for it? Now, don't get me wrong, you had that moment in which you lived in the joint. There's no equity though.
Right.
There's nothing built up. Um, and so there's nothing that you can take advantage of. There's no value to your investment in that time.
Right.
At least with TCC, I know that a lot of the students are like, well, we don't want to waste our time taking this class if I'm just going to fail, because they feel like they don't have time to take L's,
Right.
and then taking an L is kind of important nowadays, man, because people don't know how to lose
Man,
without it turning into World War III.
I won't mention the name for FERPA laws and whatever, but uh, one of my favorite students, made a D in my class,
Mhm.
and I didn't even remember that she took my class after
Oh,
getting a D, bouncing out for a couple of semesters, maybe not even a couple. I'd have to go back and look at it to be sure. But came back in class and just blew it out of the water, and then took like
mhm.
2 or 3 classes with me successfully, and just made nothing but A pluses on everything she turned in. And it wasn't until she came in and talked to me in my office that the realization hit that this was a student who sat in the back and never said a word in my class, and went through so many struggles and ended up making a D, to the person then who came back at the front of the class and was talking and speaking and participating and doing all these other things. And then when she told me, then I kind of like it brought me back. Oh my God, I do remember, because I had this weird thing. I can remember where students sit, where they at, what classroom
Yeah.
they're in, even if I don't remember their name.
Mhm.
Uh, and man, it was so real. Like that student is off and done with graduate school and running like nonprofits, and been all over the world. And that passion for academia and knowledge she cultivated after a loss. Like, if that doesn't explain to you how there's value in defeat, I don't know what else I can tell you. But you gotta stay with it, stick with the course, and understand that there's value in those losses. There's tremendous value if you drink the water. You know what I mean? But we can't force you to. We can do all these things. And I got a student in my class right now who bothers me. Dude just comes in, looks at his phone, and then 5 minutes later walks out. And he's a
Uh-huh.
smart dude. He's a smart dude. 4.0 type dude. Can come in and just knock out stuff. But um, he's at a C right now, and he could easily be at an A if he worked and put his mind in it. But sometimes people ain't ready to eat yet. Sometimes they need that hit in the mouth. People been giving him A's all this time because he's
Mhm.
clearly smart, and then he's hit with something that's pretty hard that he's got to put some investment in. Because I don't care how smart you are, if you can't invest the time, you're not going to be able to write no essay for me, right?
Right.
Because clear
You're gonna
thinking is,
plateau.
yeah, clear writing is a reflection of clear thinking, and if you're all over the place, you ain't gonna be able to write that essay. Um, and it's remained to be seen whether or not he'll be able to drink from the fountain yet, or if he ain't ready yet. But if he don't make himself ready, he may not ever realize the potential. And maybe the loss will wake him up. But that's hard to do as well when your institution is now telling you, well, we're going to fund you by how many students you have by this date, and
we're only gonna give you scholarships, or we're only gonna provide you with some type of funding for these classes at this time, for this semester, and it's all scheduled for them, like the
right.
eight guided pathways and 7 courses. Oh, was I
Three,
supposed to say
four,
that?
3, 4 media, what goals, principal, man, vice principal. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's tough that way because a lot of these students, man, they get the pressure, and then maybe they'll break, and it doesn't matter. A lot of students too. Um, the, they went back to that immediate gratification concept where it sort of feels like I got to know it. I got to know it. And I've been Han comes to my office a lot, and we have conversations about that. And I love how passionate he is for education and
Mhm.
being a student. And I just keep talking to him about get your writing skills down, and he works really hard. He's throwing in these articles for the underground. It's like he knows where his strengths and where his weaknesses are, and he puts in a lot of effort to strengthen his weaknesses. And a lot of students these days won't do that. They'll see their weaknesses, they'll shy away from them, and then they'll just shut down. And we have to increase the sense of positivity around the idea of adversity, which
Right.
seems to be declining
Oh, for
for
sure.
some reason or another.
Yeah, I mean, you can see that we try to reduce or limit barriers in a multitude of areas. However, we've also seen that, these barriers build resistance. I'm sorry, exposure builds resistance.
Mm-hmm.
The more and more you're exposed to something, which takes time, the more likelihood you're going to be resilient in overcoming, various issues. And, you know, and maybe at our level, it's difficult, more difficult because our variables are so wide on the spectrum. Whereas at a university level, I mean, maybe it feels like those students tend to have more time. Many of them are not, as you said, they're not 40, they're not 50, they're not having families, or many of them don't have like families or jobs that they're trying to maintain. They're just focused on school, and so they have that privilege of time to try to knock some of that stuff out. But but
Man,
any
so true, man. It's so true. And this kind of brings me back to the whole scheduling and regimentation of our society. Michel Foucault wrote a lot of work on insane asylums and punishment and deviancy in society. And there's a really good documentary, man. It's like 45 minutes. It's on YouTube, free. I always forget the name of it, but it usually shows up when you Google Foucault's name. And it starts out with like this wolf howling. And in that video, or in that documentary, he'll show like what the prison system looks like. Then he'll show a video of like what the insane asylum looks like. And then it'll show a video of what the high school classroom looks like. And there's like these similarities between this institutionalization of preparing people to go through the motions in society.
Mhm.
It reminds me, I talk a little bit about this when I talk about the first industrial revolution and the panopticon, which Jeremy Bentham created, of this all-seeing eye that is able to look at you and observe everything, but you can't look at it, but you know it's seeing you. And this emerges at a time in which prisons begin to first evolve into certain different things than they used to be, right? In the mid 19th century, early 19th century, prisons you didn't serve time. They held you in a cell until they meted judgment upon you, which was like whipping or bandishing or sentencing to death or paying a fine or something. But it wasn't until time of this panopticon, the creation of these prisons in the early 19th century, where you go and they'll say, okay, now we're going to put you in jail and have you serve a particular amount of time, where you have to sit there in isolation on your own to be corrected, to be put on the right proper path, to be institutionalized. And they started developing the public school system to reflect this way. And then they start, developing the insane asylums in this way. And it used to be that the university maybe is in some areas is one of the last places where you could free your mind and kind of hopefully be free a little bit from these restrictions. And there are pressures to try to make the community college go in the wrong direction, to deprive people of that freedom to sit and think and have the time to reflect. And it's hard to do, particularly in a society when you have all these other things going on in your life, right? That's why I be trying to tell my son, man, it's like, don't be going to work so much at this bar. What you making this money for? I'm paying for everything you do. What you need the money for, right? I'm paying for you to do all this stuff so you don't have to waste your time doing other things that aren't associated with the passion that you're trying to focus on. You want to go get a job as an intern somewhere where you're spending your time doing the things that are going to keep you closer to being a professor or a psychologist or whatever it is that you're trying to do. But a lot of our students, us included, weren't able to do that very often. I wasn't able to do that at all. My whole life, every time I was in college, I had a full-time job or a part-time job with several part-time gigs and a wife and a family and a mortgage and all this other stuff.
At the same time though, and the reason why you want to give Aiden that room is because you recognized how much that impacted your time.
Right.
And so you're trying to deny him the resistance.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? The
right.
very thing we were just talking about a second ago is that we tend to try to remove these barriers. And then what do? We're trying to remove barriers. These are putting more barriers up for themselves.
Right. It's weird, man.
At the same time, we're trying to break them down. Weird. And maybe it's because at the end of the day, they see their own path, their own linear path, and they realize that I need to go through this my way.
Yeah. That reminds me of is a verse that Andre 3000 gives on, I guess it's the first Outkast album, where it's a song called Get Up, Get Out, where it's like, you need to get up, get out, and get something. Don't spend all your time trying to get high. And there's this one verse where he's like talking about how messed up everything was. And I didn't want to go to class. I'd be rather shooting pool or looking for something afterwards and messing around and doing all these things. And then the song is trying to tell you to keep your mind on the end goal and grind and do really hard and do all these great things. And he's talking about how he didn't do that. But then at the very end, he's like, it don't matter though, because I'm an OUT cast. Now get up off your ass. He's sort of like, I was able to get through these things because I'm Andre 3000. I found it and I got through it and I got lucky in many ways.
At the end of the day.
At the end of the day, and you may not be that lucky. You may be, but trying to guide them, that's hard. It's a hard thing to do. You don't know. Maybe success and strength and wisdom comes with throwing yourself in a situation and getting out of it and then reflecting on maybe later I don't know. It's hard. It's a hard thing to say. It's a hard thing to pinpoint what makes us successful or what makes us be able to get through these situations and these circumstances. And then we try to tell our kids to not go that path, but they're going to put
they'll find a way to throw their own barriers up, dude.
away, man.
No matter how much you tear them down, they'll put them back up right there for you. So, but man, we're out of. Speaking of time,
we're out of time. Speaking of time, yeah, and that's a good way to. I got a quote that's right here. "Time is my greatest enemy" by Eva Peron. Since we ran out of time, it's an interesting quote.
I tell my students, time is your best friend. Because here's what happens: we show up for the exam. Let's say the exam's at 9 o'clock. I go, here we are. It's time to separate, the quick and the dead. And the exam starts at 9. And you think that time is the enemy, but it's not. It's actually your best friend, because at 10:20, whether you're ready or not, the exam's over. Like at 10:20,
right.
It's over. You know that for a fact. You know that the suffering will end.
The suffering will
end. At the very least by 10:20. Time is your best friend. You were your worst enemy because you didn't plan accordingly. This was where success was your preparation was supposed to meet the time in order to determine success, and you didn't prepare accordingly.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense if you approach that test as if it's something that you suffer. But if you love it and you want to soak it in and you want to write nonstop, I remember my professor used to have to kick me out of, hey man, time's over. I'm still going. Yeah. I'm still going. I can go all day. You know what I mean?
I got another class to go to. Time.
Perspective. That's crazy. It shows you right there. Perspective right there. Time can be your best friend or it can be your greatest enemy. Really depends on the circumstance that you're in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's very true. Because there have been plenty of moments where I'm like, yo, I don't have enough time. And it does feel like it's against me.
Yeah.
And then there are other times where I'm like, man, time is a beautiful thing because of what I get to enjoy, what I'm around. And how about those moments where you feel infinite? And that means no time. Right? You just think about like when you and someone else, you feel infinite. Or you are somewhere else and you feel infinite. That there are no barriers, because I feel like time is a barrier. Infinity is the antithesis of time, in which there's the possibilities are whatever you want them to be.
For real, man. For real. We don't have time anymore. Speaking of that, we're out of it. But I've always had this dream of writing a short story about a guy who could pause time once in his life. Everything stops but you. You're conscious, you can learn, you can go about and do everything you want. You're not going to progress or lose age. But once you hit play again, you'll have all that knowledge you accumulated with you, and everything else will start where it left off, but you can never repause again. How long would you be able to last? Would you ever hit play? We don't have time to talk about it.
You can only do it one time?
One time. That's it. For as long as you want. For as long as you want to be an eternity. And you'd be suffering, thinking, oh my God, I can't talk to nobody. But once I hit play, it's all going to go back to normal. I'm going to have all this knowledge. So let me just read this one more book. Let me just go to this one more library. Let me do this one more thing. But it's
man,
never.
I might push that button on some stupid stuff. on something stupid. I'd be like, oh man, I burnt the rice. Let me pull it back 5 minutes, or something. Oh, I was supposed to talk to that chick. Let me pull it back 5 minutes. On something stupid.
Right. Right on, man. Right on.
All right, man.
It was good. I'll see you next week, y'all.
All right. We'll see you guys. We're done.